of bias.
Okay. What if I were to tell you, sorry, if somebody were to walk up to you and say, I think zebras are better than horses, you would say what?
I mean, I could say a lot of different things, but I could say, okay.
You say, okay. Now, if that person was saying, I think that we should, because I think zebras are so much better than horses, I think we should hurt and kill zebras.
Yeah, I don't think that's quite on par with my own
What would you
ethics.
call that? What would you call that person?
Someone who wants to create segregation.
And mental.
No. I'm talking about the person they're not segregating zebras and horses. They want to hurt and kill them.
Oh, a murderer.
But did you call that person mentally fit?
No.
If this person and millions of others were like, yeah, I think you're right. Let's hurt and kill the zebras or the horses, and let's create systems where the horses can't live normal horse lives, but the zebras, yeah, they're so beautiful, they're so great. Let's put them on pedestals and let's feed them well, and let's give them certain types of advantages so that they can grow and progress into these beautiful animals. And these other ones, let's slaughter them and let's do these other things to them, because let's suppress them and hurt them and destroy the quality of their lives and not allow them to gallop or have the full extent of their experience. I think you would call those people delusional.
Yeah.
So when we replace zebras and horses with skin color, why do we lose the delusional aspect of that?
That's so true.
Well, I think it's because the first part of that analogy is it a zebra walking up to a zebra? Is it a horse walking up to a zebra? You know, like who are the two communing over this? Who are having the conversation? Because then it becomes this tribal, instinctual, well, fuck, I don't want to be part of the group that's going to get hurt. I don't want to be part of the quote unquote, winning group. And that is unfortunately a part of our human, nature, which I think a lot of us are hoping that as the paradigm shifts, we shift that almost out of ourselves.
I would staunchly disagree with that. That is not part of a human nature. That is part of our sociological nature.
Yeah, I agree.
That is not part of our human nature. So my point in bringing up like the Equiday example is this: the only difference between a zebra and a horse is where they're from, right? If the fact it means that you want to hurt, suppress, oppress, destroy, maim, and kill the other one, that makes you fucking crazy.
Yeah.
We know that makes you crazy when it comes to Equiday. We know that makes you crazy when it comes to koalas versus grizzly bear. We know that. We know that makes you crazy when it comes to anything else. But when you say skin tone, we go, well, it's, there's a subtle nuance. No, it's the same thing.
And it's almost like you wanted to have a term and it be knee neck. I wish that
knee neckophilia.
Yeah, I wish that racism was a term that was considered to be a mental illness.
Well, I think in 10 years, we'll look back and we will classify racism as a mental illness. It is textbook delusional disorder.
It is.
Yeah. So continuing on in that process of how do we allow people to grow and become conscious in this situation? What are your thoughts on cancel culture, and at what point is that a reasonable response?
I think that 2019, we were all about cancel culture. I think 2020 birthed cancel culture for us.
Yeah.
And it said, how do you like it? And to mesh this answer and the last one together, I'm not saying you should cancel delusional people. I'm saying you should treat them like a delusional. And they need help. They need care. They need respect. They need compassion. But they also don't need to be engaged.
Yeah.
At a certain point in time, when you argue with somebody who's delusional, you become part of the delusion. Now, if you know that human beings are equal because that's just what it is, then why are you arguing? Why are you trying to convince them? There's no need. History will convince them. History will prove them wrong. So I'm telling anti-racists, save your breath, save your energy, save your time. There's people who I call swing voters. I think people have swing consciousness, right? And there's some people who are just delusional and they're never going to get it. They're just never going to get it. Or there's so much they're so sheepish that they won't get it until everybody else gets it, right? And that's just what it is. That's human nature, right? That we have certain people, we have ancestors. We came from two ancestors. One was a seeker, one was a dweller. One went outside the cave, one stayed in. One went over to the horizon, looked over, saw a fruitful valley and was like, yo, guys, it's not bad over here. The other one was like, no, I like the structure of the cave. And we have these puppet shows we do on the wall. And no, life is about this puppet show. And life is about the structure that I've created in the cave. Then we had an ancestor who built an instrument and played it in the cave for thousands of years. But then one day one ancestor, she walked out into the field and played the harp in the field. And it helped others bring their harps and their music out and play it. No matter what was out there, no matter what dangers may have happened to her, she did that. So we have those people with the same DNA here. We have seekers and we have dwellers. And there's a time for consciousness to seek, and there's a time for consciousness to dwell, and we have dwelled long enough. And so seekers don't have to convince dwellers to be seekers. You don't have to do that. You just have to be a seeker. You just have to be who you are. And people call that courageous. They call that, your curiosity outweighs your fear.
So again, when we come up, we say this is a messy conversation. We're going to choose progress over perfection. When we come up against cancel culture, does it, like, if someone is, and the question is where does harm become irrevocable, right? Like, where does it draw the line, maybe, is the better question. But we have this culture of, and it seems to be growing right now, especially that focus on what this person did wrong. And then what happens is the shaming and the things that happen there, which are necessary to a degree, but cause that person to stunt their growth at that place, really, to a degree.
Yeah, I don't know if I believe in cancel culture peer to peer, right? Or society to peer. I don't know if I believe in that, because that seems more like revenge than it does rehabilitation, right? So if you're interested in revenge, you cancel somebody. Okay, cool. If you're interested in rehabilitating them, like, for instance, I'm friends with people who were formerly racist, right? Because I've rehabilitated them. They've converted to anti-racism. And so when you cancel everything, once again, like 2019, we're all about cancel culture. 2020, Mother Earth cancel culture for us, right? So did we like that? Did we like having our options limited to the point of where we couldn't change our minds about things or become better people about things? And, it's almost as if cancel culture, and I think we use it really incorrectly. We should be canceling white supremacy. We should be canceling the ideas of old, right? We should be canceling old ideologies that no longer serve us, old agreements that have gotten us into this place that we're in, and creating new agreements, right? So cancel culture, I think, is valuable, but I think it has to be towards ideologies, towards behaviors, towards patterns. Cancel those things. Don't cancel people, because people are led by these old agreements. They're led by these old patterns, right? So canceling the pattern would cancel the behavior.
Right. Yeah, I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah.
So the two people, the seeker and the dweller too, reminded me, if you go far back enough, we're all from the same ancestors. And you're my brother. I'm just a fated Black person, as we've said before. Yeah,
we're 13. We're cousins 13 times removed, 14 times removed.
So it's crazy that this is even where we're at.
It's still crazy. It's the conversation. Unfortunately, like you said, this is where we're at. Like it is. And so we have to go from there.
And I don't know if this is even that related, but when I was in Uganda, I remember being on a, like, matatu. It's like one of those little, it's almost like a cattle truck, but you're all like crammed in there. You can hardly sit. And, they can drink the water just fine. If I drink the water in Uganda, I typically will probably get sick. And I had this one water bottle to last me all day. And someone next to me was thirsty, and she just held her hand out for it. It wasn't weird for her to ask for some of my water. And I handed it to her, and they passed it around. And by the time it got back to me, it was empty. But it was the fact that, like, none of them in this matatu, none of them were family. None of them knew each other, but they treated each other as such. And it wasn't weird for them to share one bottle of water. Whereas here, if that were to happen that would never happen on a bus, like this country, we don't treat each other like family. We've lost that. Or I don't know if we ever even had it.
No, in this country, we've never had that. Like, this country was based on dehumanizing people from the beginning. And yeah, once again, you can become very rich that way. But what does that do to your humanity?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a question about the terms and labels that we're
I'm really enjoying this, by the way.
Okay, thank you for saying that. So the terms that we hear coming around, like Karen, don't be a Karen, this type of thing. What is your viewpoint on something like that, where it becomes, in a sense, derogatory? Like, I understand the reason that it's come about. I understand where it can be useful, I think, but is it helpful at the end of the day?
Sorry for anyone listening that's named Karen.
Yeah, by the way, Karens, like real Karens.
I always thought that was funny because I have a couple of friends that do now.
I know.
It was like, for a while, people named Felicia.
Oh, yeah.
You could not say bye.
here's the thing. You words have no meaning without context. So why do you call them a Karen?
Are you asking?
Yeah.
Well, I don't call anyone a Karen. But
why do people get called Karens?
From what I've experienced, it's people who are like, they're the ones who want to talk to the manager. They're the ones that, you know, are yelling about the masks and stuff like that. I haven't
calling the cops for no good real reason.
There you go. It's mostly a policing mentality. They have a policing mentality, right? So there's a policing mentality that happens, and based on that policing mentality, you put someone's life in danger. You put someone's quality of. You diminish someone's quality of life. You diminish their decency. Even if you don't know that's what you're doing, that's what that person is doing. So that's why they're being called a Karen, because it simplifies the attitude of policing behavior into one word. And you can point it out, and it becomes, once again, a sword, a shield, and a flag that protects you from people policing your being, your thought processes, your physical space, or your intentions. Like, for instance, you see these videos of I don't use the term Karen because I don't think it's helpful, but I understand why it's being used.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing. I don't know if you guys have ever been, and I'll use it in this context. I don't know if you guys have ever been Karen, but I have. And what happens is you get so upset, and so you feel like your decency is being diminished in such a palpable way that you want to act out in anger and frustration, all these things that you can't really do. So what do? You either have to sort of get yourself out of the situation that you never asked to be in. You're being harassed. You're literally being harassed. And now people are saying, well, the person who's doing the harassing, sometimes it's illegal. Sometimes it's assault. Sometimes they're putting their hands on you. I don't really care how they feel about being called a name, because it's the behavior. It's your assaulting behavior. It's your policing mentality. It's the fact that you might call the cops on somebody for not doing anything that could actually get them killed. Elijah McClain, right? So it's almost as if it's almost this sense of fragility where people go, well, Karen's derogatory. You're like, but why were you called the Karen? Don't change the subject. You were called the Karen because you called the police, Amy Cooper, on Christian Cooper for bird watching.
Exactly. And that the meme of you don't do anything to break the law and cops will leave you alone. No, Elijah's a perfect example that that's not the case. But there's tons of perfect examples.
That's the exact same thing or very similar thing to telling a woman she shouldn't have worn that or she wouldn't have been assaulted.
Right. Exact same thing.
Right? So it's almost like, once again, Candace Owens, who watches, and people like her, who watch George Floyd be publicly executed, and the first thing that they do is the consciousness level they have is to look up George Floyd's record.
Right.
Instead of the one who's doing the killing.
The murdering. Yeah. Why don't you look up the executioner's record? See what he's done. You look up the victim's record. It's like watching, sorry, and I hate to use the analogy, but it's the same thing. It's like watching a rape on camera and going, let's see what that victim did.
Oh, well, she was a stripper 5 years ago.
Yeah. Well, she was a stripper. And she went to jail for,
prostitution 3 years ago. Yeah.
But come on, this is not a great person. I'm not saying she deserves to be raped, but look what she did 8 months before.
And so this guy doesn't deserve punishment for raping her.
Even if you're saying he deserves punishment, why did you look up her record? Why did you look up her?
She was raped. She was a victim.
People keep changing the subject. And so and not to say that you are, but I'm saying I've heard this a lot. Oh, Karen's derogatory. Okay, you want to call me Jerome? Cool. I'll take that way over the N-word. It's not the same.
Yeah.
We get called things for just breathing, right?
I guess
Karen gets called Karen because she's putting your life in danger, or the quality of your life, or she's diminishing the quality of your life, or diminishing your human decency. That's why there's a name for it.
Yeah. The concern for me becomes when we start stereotyping and labeling things, because that's what got us here in the first place, essentially, is when we create this broad, a name for this is, in this case, a Karen normally would be portrayed as a middle-aged white woman. So, and probably someone on the right or on the far right, right? So these things.
No. There is a racial bigotry within liberalism that many liberals can't even entertain the fact that they're racist, so they become even more racist. And it's really sad. It's really, really sad, because it's like it's almost like they'll vote for Obama and they want to help. And like Amy Cooper is going to vote for Biden. 30 something years
I
old.
can't believe,
New York City. You know what I'm saying? Like, this
that's
is
one
not
of the
like
discouraging things in the midst of this movement is we don't really have two people. Out of the two people we have, neither of them are going to help solve this issue.
Well, Biden's going to have to, or I mean, here's the thing. You're normally right. And I'm not going to say that you're wrong, but I'm saying I think that there's a difference this year only because if Biden wins, he's going to have to win on a BLM platform. Because Black people are ready to say, fuck the system, and let's not vote for anybody, and let people like Amy Cooper be stuck with Trump for the next however many years he decides to be president. Because we can't even go bird watching without Biden voters trying to threaten our lives and use the police as a weapon. What do we have? What do we got?
Yeah.
We got nothing. Like, so if you push people to that point, you're going to get what you want.
Right.
Which is like, so Amy Cooper's like, I can possibly get Christian Cooper killed, and then Christian sister's still going to go to the polls on election day and help me get my agenda across.
What do you mean by liberals denying their racism so much that they become more racist? What does that mean? Okay,
so we are everybody. So I'm going to just be real. The three of us are racist. Why?
Yeah, I don't disagree with you.
We were raised in a racially biased container with racially biased ideas and racially biased media. I'm scared of the same Black boogeyman you guys are, right? I'm scared of the same Rashawn that you guys are. Rashawn doesn't exist really. He never existed. It was a portrayal of white supremacy to scare us into thinking that that it's right to dehumanize these type of people. Now, the people that mainstream America is frightened of, some of those people are my cousins, and they just look like that, but they're really nice people. George was a great guy, I'm sure, in some ways. In some ways, I'm sure he wasn't. I'm sure I don't know the guy, but he's not a hero. He's not a martyr to us. He's a symbol. He's analogous to what America has always done to us. Right? They need us. So
yeah, he's not a martyr because it wasn't his decision to die.
Absolutely. Candace doesn't know the difference. So what you have is, how do I put this? So if you're not willing to look at where you are on that racially biased spectrum, that actually makes you more racist.
Right.
Right? So like I was willing to look at where I was in the sexually biased, on the sexist spectrum.
Yeah.
About 5 or 6 years ago. And I realized I was on the left side of that spectrum. And so on one end of that spectrum, you have guys who tell bad jokes or don't stop the bad joke from happening, or they whistle at the girl who's holding the card at the fight, or something like that. And on the other side of that spectrum, you have men who desecrate the female energy in such a way where they kidnap, rape, and murder women.
Right.
They're all sexist, but that doesn't mean that we have to identify with each other. So on that one end of that spectrum, I realized that I was the person stopping the lewd comment. I was that guy. I was the person not making the lewd comment. So I wasn't even here. But I wasn't the person who was understanding and having compassion for the fact that women feel, not all, many women feel underappreciated, undervalued, especially at work, and not heard. And so it took me, bumbling through some stupid questions for a couple of years just to become more of a feminist, right?
Yeah.
But if I refused to look at where I was on that spectrum, I would have had to be more sexist.
Right.
So it's a lot of the liberals who are just on this one end of the spectrum, who don't stop the racist joke, or who make the racist joke sometimes, or they make the generalization about all people, right? And on the other end of that spectrum, you have white supremacist Nazi pieces of shit who execute people in public.
Right.
Once again, that doesn't mean you have to identify with everybody on that spectrum. We're all racist, but we're not all the same. So when you go, oh, I'm not racist, that means that you can't even identify where you are on that spectrum.
And sometimes it's something so subtle. Like, I know for me, where I found my racism is that as a kid, I had multiple Black best friends. So I thought, oh, well, I'm not racist because I didn't even notice they were Black. But me not noticing that they were Black, me not seeing their color meant I didn't see them. I didn't realize that their experience was different than mine. And that was a form of racism.
It's very interesting when you and that's very astute of you to realize that and figure that out. That's really honest. I applaud you for that, because most people can't do that. And it says something. It says that
it was on mushrooms.
There you have it. But it says that you're being actively anti-racist. That's what it means. And when people go, well, I don't see color, I don't see them, what it means is that you're devaluing their color in your head.
Yeah, you're not seeing them, right?
Right.
I see it's all the same. Well,
right.
No, because their experience is much different than yours.
Yeah.
Because you're devaluing their color. You're devaluing their color. And it's almost like we can get to a place one day where we don't have to deal with that. We don't have to see that. Hopefully my kids can, but we're not there now.
I hope that does happen. And I hope after that, you talked about trafficking. I really hope that sex trafficking, like, I feel like that's something that is not looked at all. That's something that's been erased from our history, and something that people think of the word slavery and they act like it's something of the past, when we have just as many slaves today, but its majority of it is in sex trafficking.
Well, I would say there's a lot of it in sex trafficking. I don't know the numbers, but I would say that there's a lot of it in sex trafficking. That's never stopped. Mm-hmm. And a lot of slavery, American slavery in particular, has moved and transmuted itself
into prison system.
Mass incarceration.
Yeah.
So the really quick history on that is, after the Civil War ended, you had Lincoln and Sherman give a reservation to Black people that only lasted 2 years. Then the Union Army, which is I hate saying Union, the U.S. Army rounded up most of the Black people in the South and put them in the camps, or they somehow controlled them in some way, shape, or form. And then once they handed the power back to the white supremacists in the South, what they did was they created these laws called Black codes, meaning that you couldn't pay Black people more than a certain, like pennies on the dollar. If you did, as a white person, you'd be arrested yourself. Black people had nowhere to go, so they were vagrants. So vagrancy became punishable by 15 to 20 years in a work camp. Loitering became punishable by 15, 20, 30 years in a work camp. Wow. Public lewdness, which means speaking aloud, or spitting. They observed Black behavior because they had done it for centuries, and they knew what Black people did. And they go, this is illegal, this is illegal, this is illegal, this is illegal. And because of that, these laws have to be upheld. And, 5 to 10 years, 15, 20 years in work camps. The work camps for the plantations, it's the exact same.
Yeah.
There was no difference.
And anyone who wants to go further on that can watch 13th on Netflix as well.
Absolutely. So what you have is a system of physical bondage that ended in 1865, on June 19th, 1865. But the emotional, the sociological, the structural, the infrastructural bondage has never ended. It's never ended. Right now, there's people in prison camps who are doing forced labor for 35 cents an hour, 65 cents an hour, $1.50 an hour. And they're in there for 20 years for being an accessory to robbery, meaning they were in the car when it happened, somebody else robbed the store. Come on. Those are the same laws that are on the books from 1865. So when you look at the actual American history that is unrevised, in many ways you're looking at the most exploitative country that's existed since Rome or Egypt. And you have to look at what happened to those empires. They collapsed on themselves because of how bad they were to their own people. And I think that should be a wake-up call. You can't keep treating people like that and expect your society to survive.
Right.
It doesn't happen throughout history. It just doesn't happen.
Do you have a prediction of where this is going to go in the near future, especially maybe with the election?
I don't really concern myself with the near future, because the near future is the near future. It's going to go up and down. It's going to go up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. I think that we have to set a global pillar of consciousness to eradicate systemic racism and systemic oppression by 2030. I think that we have to do that. I think the UN needs to get involved. I think that the global community needs to get involved. And I think that is a global pillar of consciousness that we should eradicate it by 2030, because if we don't, the entire world's in trouble. Like, what happened? Let me just pose a general question. What are the circumstances that have created terrorist cells?
What are the general? Say again.
Just what are the circumstances that have created terrorist cells? A feeling of hopelessness, of never having your voice being heard, of crippling oppression for decades, if not centuries.
Feeling of unsafety.
Constant fight or flight, high unemployment, an unbelievable death toll at the hands of a system, of a government, and of enforcement, of law enforcement. Take away the names of the countries, take away the names of the people or the descriptions of the people, and just put in the numbers. Just put in the sociological factors that lead up to destruction. If somebody created a checklist, I bet you there's 10 things on their checklist. I bet we're at 7. And I'm a very, very, very peaceful person. I have worked so hard in my life. My little brother was murdered. I have been hospitalized by the police for jaywalking. Pepper sprayed in the mouth, the eyes, tased in the balls, in the back. I have been kidnapped from my own house by police because they didn't believe it was my house, so they arrested me, put me in jail. And people go, oh, why don't you sue? Well, because the police unions are really strong. They'll make your life a living hell. So I've had guns pulled on me by police since I was 12 years old. The first time I got arrested, I was 8 years old and had my face pushed against the wall for playing hide and go seek, and then got handcuffed. It has taken everything in my life to find peace from what my country has done to me, and what has been allowed to happen to me at 8, 12 years old. And then people argue with me about whether that matters. I'm not the kind of person that the world needs to be worried about. I have so many options in my life. I can leave this country. I'm not here now. I'm in Mexico. Right? So I have a lot of options. But what about the people who don't?
Right.
What do you tell them? What do you tell the kid who went to Iraq in 2016 and just came back, and he sees somebody his age getting hunted by his white neighbors, called Ahmaud Arbery, whose only crime was that he wouldn't be kidnapped by 3 men? What do you tell him? What do you tell those vets coming back who are getting pepper sprayed in the face by bicycle cops, who are saying, my life has value, and I lost friends fighting for this country? What do you tell them?
What do we do about the police? I mean, there's this call for defunding the police. Okay.
And people don't really understand what that means.
Yeah. Can you explain?
It sounds scary to people because they think, well, my uncle's a cop.
You could still be a cop. Your uncle just can't be a piece of shit anymore.
He's not required to be do multiple things that he's not trained for.
Right. And so I should take that back. I don't mean it's your uncle. What I mean is, here's the thing. When you get beat up by the cops when you're 8 years old,
I understand.
So it's PTSD. Like whenever I see what happened to Elijah, when I see what happened to George, when I see what happens to these people, like I go into a hole for 2 or 3 days of depression, severe depression, because of the PTSD that I have from literally being like, what happened to me at 8 years old was child abuse, right? Like the person should have gone to prison for what he did to me. At 8 years old, right? But he's a cop, right? And like that was this really confusing thing. I wanted to be a cop at 8 until it happened, right? And then these are the good guys. These are the guys in the movies that you root for, right? So like it becomes this mind fuck that happens. And so like I would say, so defunding the police is a very simple way of saying demilitarize the police.
And put more money that's going towards the police, put it more towards other like mental health and things like that, right?
Right. When you militarize the police, they become militarized. This is what it is. They become violent. So like right now, you call 911 for everything, and then they send the police for everything. So you say, there's a guy acting weird. Does he have a gun? No. Is anyone in danger? No. Okay, we'll send the cop. We'll send people with guns.
Right.
What? Why? Mehcad Brooks is sleeping in his car at a Wendy's parking lot. Is anyone in danger? No. He's just drunk sleeping in his car. Okay, well, if we defund the police, instead of sending people with weapons to deal with a drunk guy sleeping in his car, you would send a service that would take him home. Because he did the responsible thing and pulled over, is what he did.
Right.
So defunding the police is just basically saying, we have these city budgets of like, I don't know, 500 million depending on the city, and 390 million go to the police. Why? For what? Like, and then 1 million goes to parks and services. Like, what? No. So it's just spreading the money out in ways that can help us, and thinking about domestic abuse or mental health checks or wellness checks. A lot of times these people who are shot and unarmed, they need medical attention. They need a social worker. They need a psychologist or psychiatrist. They need to be taken to a mental health professional, or a mental health professional needs to show up on the scene. Not somebody who went to 3 weeks of training who has 4 guns on it. That's not the person who needs to be there. So when we talk about defunding the police, it's not so much about like, I saw this meme saying, well, all the burglars are waiting till we defund the police so they can start burgling again.
Yeah.
When have you seen cops stop a burglary? That's not what they do. They catch the burglar after. They don't stop the bank robbery. They catch them after. They're investigators. They're not de-escalators. They're not taught that. They're not taught that. They're militarized and they escalate issues. So when you have an unmilitarized civilian population who is being policed by a militarized population, what do you have? It's a recipe for disaster, especially when those people, they just need a high school degree. They don't need a master's. They don't need a lot of training. Most police academies are 3 weeks and they give you a badge and a gun. And these people come into this job with the ideologies and the ideas and the prejudices that they had 3 weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
That hasn't changed.
It's nothing.
So, and you give them guns and you give them power, and then you don't, there's no repercussions for when they kill people who look like me. So what? Like,
I think beauty school lasts longer than that.
You need more training as a barber.
Yeah.
Than you do as a cop. You need more training as a chef.
A yoga teacher. Yeah.
You need more teacher or a kindergarten teacher or a dental hygienist. Like, I don't know what I could, if I decide to be a cop July 1st, I could be on the street by August. That makes no sense.
Yeah.
With a gun. And a level of impunity when it comes to pulling that gun and using it, knowing that there won't be any repercussions as long as that person is dark-skinned.
So defunding the police is about reformation.
Yeah.
Defunding the police is about safety and security, right? Because, like, so for instance, like, yes, it is about reformation. So, like, you can't reform the police. You can't reform the police. That's Band-Aids. Okay, so here's something really interesting that if people understood this, they would understand defund the police. American policing comes from slave catchers. We didn't have cops. We had the British redcoats that kept law and order in the colonies. When they left, you had militias, right? But they policed property. They didn't police people. Let's say a landowning white male had an issue with another landowning white male. You have a council figure that out, and it would be mostly a civil matter. Nobody would go to jail. Not in early America. So so the only thing you were policing was property. And what property meant back then were Black people. If they escaped, bringing them back. Slave catching. That's what it was. That's what it was. And the slave catchers became the Confederate soldiers. And the Confederate soldiers became the cops. And their kids became cops. And their kids became cops.
That's crazy.
And their kids became cops.
And it makes sense now.
That's what it is. And so we're funding the same people, the same lineage,
right,
that hung people from trees.
Yeah.
That cut my great aunt's fetus out of her stomach. We're funding the same people because they have a level of impunity, and they know if I get a badge like my grandfather, I can do it. So when you understand that American policing, the foundation, the birth of American policing was in slave catching, was in policing the Black body and the Black life in every way, meaning a white child could ask to see a slave's papers. And if the white child disbelieved, thought that the slave's papers were a forgery, they could enslave that person again. That's where caring comes from. The policing mentality of a white citizen to police a Black life. That's where caring comes from. That's where the mentality comes from.
Right.
So prior to having slave catchers, because obviously bounty hunters weren't the most financially feasible thing to do, they deputized white citizens to catch slaves or tell on slaves that were doing something wrong. They thought was wrong, so that they could be punished. But people were too busy, so that only lasted 10 to 15 years. So what they did was they created slave bounty hunters. And like, once again, like I said, they became the Confederates, and they became... Yeah. That's what happened. That's literally what happened.
Wow. Thank you for that history lesson. I mean it. I think that's something I was missing. So we've gone over a lot here, of course, but I want to kind of just ask you before we move on to our staple questions that are pretty quick at the end of our show here. Is there anything that you feel like we missed, and is there anything you want to just speak on that's coming up for you?
I feel like, one, I know that people get so tired of talking about race, and I get it. I get really tired of talking about race too. But as much as tired as people are about hearing about race and racism, we're so much more tired of experiencing it.
Yeah.
And I think what has to happen is, like, I truly believe that this has to happen. You can change someone's consciousness about racism in 3 weeks. I'm doing it right now. I have MAGA supporters that I was talking to 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago.
Well, I know people I want to sign up for that.
I'll tell you a short story. I worked on the Obama campaign in 2008. I went to this place called Moon Township, Pennsylvania. If you know anything about Pennsylvania, there's basically 2 cities in Pennsylvania. It's Philly and Pittsburgh, and everything in between is 1960s Alabama.
Okay.
Right? So I went to this small town called Moon Township, Pennsylvania, had a huge mall, registering voters. The Obama campaign did not allow you to push a candidate. We played by the rules, even though the McCain camp did not. So registering voters, and this guy at a sunglasses kiosk named Mike won't register to vote. I'm like, what? Why won't you register to vote? He's like, so finally, he's being real. I know why he won't do it. But I like people to tell me to my face what's going on. So finally he goes, well, I ain't voting for no nigger.
Oh my God.
And I said, okay, Mike, why won't you vote for no nigger? And he looked at me like I was crazy and couldn't believe I just didn't walk away or get mad. And I just was like, let's talk. So we sat down, we had some sparrows. Actually, he had some, I don't even. And then I had McCain's pamphlet and I had Obama's pamphlet. I ripped off the covers. And I said, I got a pen out and I said, tell me what's important to you, Mike. And he listed all the things that were important to him. I started checking things off in both pamphlets, right? At the end of what he was telling, his list of things that he valued, 7 out of 10 was Obama.
Wow.
So when you take the cover off of
Right.
Obama, you take the nonsense, take the noise, you take the preconceived notions, you take the conditioning away from the conversation, You go, what's important to you? We're all the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. Paul Selig, a guest we have on the show often, he says, what's true is always true. And it's just getting there is the really challenging part that comes with all that suffering.
Yeah. And I think, so I guess what has to happen is we have to start having the uncomfortable conversations. We have to have them, we have to start having them in a way that like, this person has been exposed to a delusional myth that has been normalized for so long, they don't know it's a delusional myth. So I have to approach them in that way.
Yeah.
And that takes compassion, that takes patience. So I guess when you're talking about the patience, I don't think there's a lot of patience left on a national level, right? On a macro level, but I think there's a lot of patience left peer to peer.
Yeah. And that's what I meant is how do we cultivate that when we're feeling fed up in the moment and maybe we just need to take a break for a moment and come back to it. Which
is privilege. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yes and no. And here's the thing. You can't fight the same fight 8 hours a day, 5 days, 7 days a week, 365. You can't do it. You can't do it yourself out. But I also think that we have a responsibility to our two ancestors who were squabbling over seeking and dwelling to find balance in that. We have a responsibility to our two ancestors to start having those conversations. We have a responsibility to hold space and to have compassion and patience for the people who might not be open to knowledge. And I'll say this, like, it's almost as if, like, how do I put this? I'm going to say something really that could be taken out of context, so I'm trying to be very careful.
Okay, progress, not perfection.
Right. Although these things live forever, and like
I know now.
In the vacuum of,
it just becomes a small sound bite.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So how do I put this? We have a responsibility to have our greatest minds in the world on this. Troubleshooting racism as if it were a problem that could end humanity as we know it, because it can't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have so we're colonizing Mars. We figured out the human genome. We're 10 years away from the singularity in machine learning. We are 10 years away from AI being as smart as the human brain.
Yeah.
We have the ability to solve this problem, but we have to look at it as a global pillar of consciousness. The greatest, like, where's Elon Musk on this? Where's he at? Like, you ain't shit to me unless you're trying to solve the issue of our day. Fuck Mars. Like, you're gonna tell me that there might be a lynching on Mars?
Right.
Then we're interstellar assholes.
Right. We're not ready for that yet. Then we need to work on this.
We're not ready. You can't fuck up too far.
That really is the gist of the argument that shouldn't be an argument of why is it Black Lives Matter versus all lives matter. It's because this has to happen first, because we're not ready to look at anything else until we can resolve this situation, which is Black Matter.
I mean, it's like if we start to colonize Mars and there's still people being executed in the street, we failed.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like we have a responsibility to all of our ancestors. No matter what your ancestors thought or what they did or what they didn't do or how complicit they were or how silent they were or how evil or vile they may have been, they also want you to heal.
Yeah. And even
they also want me to heal.
Our ancestor being Mother Earth as well, like you spoke about, and like that analogy with the farmer in the Amazon. It's like the 10,000 foot view of this is, if we're going to be able to sustain life on this planet and have any ability to steward this species, this one race, the human race, forward, then we're going to need to get right with Mother Earth, which means we have to resolve these problems, these issues first, because this is where we're at right now. We can't jump ahead. We have to do the work.
Ending oppression is beginning the end of climate change.
Yeah.
Of solving the climate change crisis, the climate crisis. Ending oppression is solving the gender pay gap. Ending oppression, because this is a consciousness issue, right?
Yeah.
That if we're able to treat people a certain way and dehumanize them and diminish their decency, then we can do it all over the place in every different facet, and also the world. We can do it to the world. We can do it to Earth. So like it's a consciousness issue of diminishing decency and humanity across the board. And once again, we have a responsibility. Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Ed, where y'all at?
Yeah.
Like this is the issue of the day.
Yeah.
This is it.
This is the labor, to use a very feminine term.
Yeah.
This is the labor of our rebirth. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. We're on it full circle, guys. I like it. All right. So
I will quote you, but
you can have it. Run with it. Okay. So there are a few short questions we like to ask the show or end the show with. And the first one is, if you could hug your younger self right now at any age, what would you say?
my mind went to my 12-year-old self after the cop pulled a gun on me. I would just tell you certain things. Like I was playing outside of the school, waiting. I forget what I was doing. I didn't ride the bus that day, and I was waiting on my grandmother to pick me up. So I was a latchkey kid, and I remember some of my friends had already left, and I was just kind of throwing rocks against this pole. And these cops rolled up, and after I asked me what I was doing, they pulled a gun and said I needed to be taught a lesson. And I would hug myself at that age, and I would say, one day the men in that car will be known as sick human beings. One day the men in that car, history will have a name for those men, and you're okay, buddy. You're what they did to you. It's not your fault. There's nothing wrong with your skin. There's nothing wrong with you. And one day you're gonna know that, and one day those men are gonna know who they are. And the world will know. I think that's what I would say.
Yeah, I think that's something young Black men right now really need to hear too. Is this incident that happened does not define who you are.
And
it's hard to know that though. As you're growing up, it's hard to know that.
Oh God, I can't imagine. Literally.
Yeah.
You have to be an alchemist. I think like being Black in this country means that you will have to sacrifice something.
Yeah.
Whether that's success or your dignity, or you have to transmute hatred and bigotry into hope and forgiveness.
My best friend, Tom Shadyac, he loves you too. He opened a rock climbing gym in the poorest zip code in America, in Memphis and Soulsville. And
Beast.
Yeah.
The original.
Yeah. But I'd love for you to go like speak to that community and get involved in what he's doing there. He doesn't charge these kids to rock climb. He's just getting them off the street and mentoring them and basically telling them what you just told your 12-year-old self, so they could really hear that from you.
Love to.
Awesome. Yeah. If you could have the whole world read one book, which would it be?
The one I'm writing right now.
Yeah?
Yeah, that sounds so conceited.
No, it's fine. We have people on here promoting their books all the time.
I mean, I would say, God, I mean, there's some, I mean, like, because of the time we're in right now, I'd say How to Be an Anti-Racist by Kendi X. Ibrahim. But I would say I'm writing a book called I Never Agreed to Be Black.
Okay.
And it's just about how the fact that we are forcibly integrated into these agreements at the moment of our birth, these inherited agreements at the moment of our birth, and how much of our lives are wasted toiling with these inherited agreements instead of pursuing what the original agreement was, which is to exist.
Yeah.
Why are you here? Exploring that agreement and creating chosen agreements that support that.
Yeah.
So that one, and I would say also right now, 1984.
Yeah, that one's coming up a lot lately.
Yeah.
So take a second gander at that one. Yeah.
I like that. If you could whisper one phrase to everyone on the planet, what would it be?
Stop fighting.
That's good. Before we let you go, where can people find you online?
Mehcad Brooks, Mehcad. That's my Instagram. That's my Twitter, my Facebook. I don't really do Facebook. I have the Church of Anti-Racism, but we're changing the name, I think, probably to the Anti-Racist Collective.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
A lot of people feel weird around the name church for some reason. So
yeah, I know. And so do I. Honestly, I'm not a churchy guy, but I just kind of feel like anti-racism has to be protected almost like a religion.
Yeah.
The ideology has to be protected. Can I say one last thing?
Absolutely.
Thank you, guys. And I think that your listeners will get this, and that's why I want to say it. So I believe consciousness is alive, right? We talked about that a little bit. And the last pulse of consciousness we had was 500 years ago, was the Reformation. And what the Reformation did was it was catapulted and amplified by, one of the reasons it happened was this invention that changed the world forever, called the printing press. And before that, you had scribes, or these high priests and priestesses, who would orate certain knowledge to people, and they'd write that down. And that, so that you had, it was all esotericism. So you had 25 people writing something down who would impart that knowledge to the aristocracy. And all this knowledge was kept in the aristocracy for centuries, millennia. The printing press changed that forever. It was the first time you could write one thing and then send it out to a bunch of people. And then what happened with that? Martin Luther he reformed the entire church. Mm-hmm. Women's role in society drastically changed within 10 years. Monarchs had to change the way that they were governed. Everything on the planet changed because people had access to information and opinions. The other thing that it did was it helped the industrialization of commerce by spreading a myth through the printing press. That myth was that races actually existed at all, and that there was a valuation structure. So what you had before that is you had ethnicities. You had people from here, people from here, people from here, people who spoke this language. That was it. That's all you had. People under this kingdom. That's it. That's what you had. You didn't have races. So a Portuguese king around 1455 got a scribe to write these myths about Africans so that his legacy would be protected as a liberator and not a human trafficker. And he said that Africa was Satan's last stronghold on the planet, and that these people are subhuman, they're savages, they're beasts. Everything that pervades today about Black culture was created in the late 15th century in Portugal and amplified by this invention called printing press. Two companies, the Dutch East Indian Company and Dutch West Indian Company, used the printing press to create pamphlets to make their sailors and pirates and investors feel better about kidnapping children from Africa. Use the Portuguese myths, right? Well, what do we have now? What's the new invention?
The internet, social media.
Yeah. The printing press was the first time people could repost or retweet something. And they used it to amplify propaganda and shape the last 5 centuries on a myth. So we are right now in the position, a brand new pulse of consciousness with this brand new piece of technology that we can use to spread truth, inclusion, and kindness and shape the next 4 or 5 centuries with that. Or we can protect the myths, the Portuguese myths that shaped the world for the last 500 years. So I just want to bring the invitation to you guys and your listeners that this is where you are. You're alive in the most beautiful explosion of consciousness and innovation in the last 500 years. And what are we going to use our printing press for?
Yeah.
Are we going to spread kindness and inclusion, the truth about humanity? Or are we going to protect the myths of the past that got us here in the first place? It's up to us.
That's really good. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for letting me. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
This is his podcast now.
No.
I'm just kidding. No, thank you so much. Even though it's a heavy topic and it's can feel overwhelming, you articulated it all in a way that felt doable. And
it is doable.
Yeah.
People know that it's doable.
Yeah.
We can do this. We can solve this.
So thank you so much.
So I certainly appreciate you guys holding space for my voice. And
of course.
Sometimes I can be long-winded, so thank you very much.
Us too, but we're glad to have you here. We're glad to share this with our listeners, and I've learned a bunch just from our little talk here today. So I appreciate the work you're doing, and I know that it's hard work. I know that is something,
Thank you for doing the hard work.
Anyone out there listening to who is taking on the burden, which it is, of doing this difficult work, know that you're serving really in your purpose, and that we appreciate you. That's all we can really say.
I'll say this. What's more difficult?
Not doing it.
Yeah.
It's more difficult sitting in the hopelessness of
allowing it to just happen and not being
of allowing the hunt to happen.
Yeah.
Whatever history will call this, just sitting in silence and trying to self-aggrandize. That to me, that's harder.
Yeah.
It's much harder.
And what is a story you want to tell your children, about how you played a role in this? So, thank you. Go ahead.
To that point, I was having a conversation with a white friend of mine. He was like, I'm having a lot of trouble with this whole thing. And he's being super honest. He's like, because it makes me feel like my parents are fucked up. And I go, well, if you feel that way about your parents, how do you want your kids to look at you?
Yeah.
I love that because to me, first of all, 90% of probably 90% of our show delves just into psychology over and over again. And so anyone realizing for the first time that their roots have, racism.
It heals their future generations. Yeah.
Yeah. First of all, we all at some point, whether it has to do with racism or anything else in our lives that becomes, that is an issue or something we find as a flaw in ourselves, comes from our previous generations, likely our conditioning, our domestications, and digging up that shit is gonna make you, for a moment, maybe even demonize your parents to some degree. And that's part of the process. And if we can do that with the light of our parents were doing the best they could from their own conditioning, we can be forgiving enough to go, okay, I see where you were. And I'm glad that I get to take from that platform and bring it up to the next level.
Yeah.
And you kind of also have to forgive them for the morality of the time. And the unawareness, because they didn't have the internet. They didn't have social media. Yeah. It's almost like you have to forgive them because unawareness was so common, right? It was so easy to be in the unawareness. Yeah. So it's like, you know what? How many times have you villainized your parents anyway? Like they're wrong about a lot of shit. They're wrong about so much shit. And so it's like, this is just another thing where you go, yeah, you guys kind of sucked on this, which is great, but like, let's not suck now.
Yeah. From going forward, now that we know we're conscious, we can move forward with that ability, because we're going to fuck up our kids in some other way, you know?
I know.
And it might be too much. It might be like trying to prove that everybody's, won too much.
Right. Who knows?
And like, people are like, oh my God, my parents are seeing it.
That's true.
So,
it very well could be. You're probably right.
My mom won't stop making me watch documentaries.
Yeah. This pendulum has to swing back. And I think that there's a lot of ancestral guilt. Yeah. But it doesn't mean it has to be your guilt.
Yeah.
Like I have a lot of ancestral trauma, but it doesn't have to be my trauma. It doesn't have to be my story. It doesn't have to be my children's story. Yeah. And the ancestral guilt does not have to be yours. It doesn't have to be yours.
Yeah.
And the privilege we all have as we're working through this thing is over our parents, we get to see that happened. This is what it created. That's, what my story is now. And where do I go from here? And that is a privilege in order to be able to do that. And that is the work also. So to, like what your friend was asking you, Mehcad, which is something that I think Jade and I have gotten a lot of texts from friends too. That question of how do I decide how to act now to my parents who might even still hold this, idea in their head and maybe aren't going to change in your lifetime. And how do I move forward from here? It's like, you just see it as it is. And it's not like, oh, accept it for what it is. It's see where they were, forgive that piece, that is what it is, and do the work. First of all, looking at that and grieving any part of them that isn't going to come along on this journey, perhaps, and then do your work of how you're going to change for yourself and for future generations to, for you to be the light.
Yeah, and I think a very easy analogy on that is like, were those people's parents for gay marriage 10 years ago?
Right.
And like, you probably you lost some respect in some ways. You're like, damn, they're really fucking backwards. But you don't think that two people of the same sex should be able to get married. And now they're probably like, oh yeah, that's no big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully this goes the same way.
Yeah.
It is. Here we are. Look at. We're working on it.
Our generation intends to make that happen.
Yes.
I think we'll slay the strategy.
Well, for the first time in a long time, there's a lot of hope now. So
let's keep that train rolling. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
A lot of intention.
Yes.
Needed. People are being intentional. Thank you so much. So next, we're going to air this the Monday after this Monday. We're going to air it in 2 parts, and we'll send you a bunch of video promos and tag you up a storm. So
that sounds great. I really appreciate it, guys. That's a treat for me. Thank you.
Thank you.